Welcome, you are watching live with Dr. Usman Zafar at News Time. Today we are going to talk about the leadership in the Middle East region. Our honorable guest is Ms. Hanan bin Khaluk, who have written an excellent book recently which is called Seeds of Change. So Hanan have been here in the region from past 18 years, and she have been at the forefront of several large public and private sector organizations. As we have seen a lot of development in the region, and we have seen a very strong leadership behind it. So it's our honor to have you, Hanan, in our show, and I would like to ask about your journey. And first of all, congratulations for your book.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting me. It's my honor and pleasure. Well, my journey goes a long back. I mean, I find it even difficult to answer the very common question of where you are from, because I was born in Casablanca, Morocco, and then I moved to the US, to New York City, to continue my education and initiate my career, my professional career journey. And then since 18 years, I'm in Dubai. So now I always introduce myself. I was made in Casablanca, I was shaped in New York City, and I have been thriving in Dubai for the past 18 years. The background in business with an MBA and finalizing my DBA as well. So my journey included a very diversified professional experience with the private sector, public sector, in industries ranging from financial industry to investments to retail and hospitality. And more recently, since 8 years, I chose to start on my own and to take the entrepreneurial journey and found Sustained Leadership Consultancy, through which trying to make a positive change, to bring a new model of leadership that I believe our region is in need, especially with the changes that we are witnessing globally.
Hanan, you and I have been together in many conferences as a speaker and a guest, and I have seen you, mashallah, speaking in front of the GCC leaders. So I would like you to explain our audience that what sort of leadership skills you have seen here in the Middle East. And normally when we compare the Middle Eastern region with the Western region, so here you become very quickly the mudir and general managers, especially when you talk about the locals. So how do you see that, how they cover up that gap? And do you see any a difference between the Western and the Middle Eastern leaderships?
Oh, well, absolutely. Cultures make a difference. What I mean by culture, it's not just the country's culture, but also it's the corporate culture. And if I have to define the leadership here, I would say it's transformative leadership. I mean, if we just look at what happened in 20 years, I don't think there is any country, and I'm just comparing the UAE, I don't think there is any country with a history of the change that happened within 50 years. I mean, it's immense change. And that only happens if you have leaders who are transformational, who have a vision and they believe in it and they manage to role model those behaviors that they want to see in their people. With that, they instill trust. And with that, they show care, because everything they do is really has at its base is really centered around the people, centered around the care of people, centered around making the country at the forefront. And I think they succeeded because of that.
And how do you see, like, more than half of the population in the Arab world, they are young entrepreneurs?
Yes.
And how do you see them leading the future? And do you see any gap when you talk about the main leadership roles in large corporates?
You see, I think the main asset that we have in the Arab region is our youth. Having almost 2/3 of the population below 25, I think that's an immense wealth, and that is the wealth that we need to be proud of, that we need to focus on, especially as the world is moving towards knowledge-based economy.
Yep.
And I see that the youth is the future, and they are the positive change agents if we build them right. The issue that we have, and I came to, I talk about that in my book. I was exposed to results firsthand with a study that I supervised that was mandated by the global consulting firm PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that is called the Arab Human Capital Challenge. And through that study, we've seen that there is a gap between the skills that are taught in our educational institutions
Yep.
and the competency that are needed at the workplace. And if I look back, I think that's what really triggered me to start my
Yeah,
own.
basically, like I have been also at the board
Yeah.
of different universities, like Ajman University of Science and Technology, and recently I have been a part of Higher College of Technology's board as well. So one of the major gap we see is basically the industry engagement programs.
Absolutely.
So when the students, they graduated from different disciplines, and when they go out, they don't find the jobs which is related to their majors.
Correct.
So how do you see, what sort of actions you think the ministries or the universities or the education specialists, they really have to take to finish this gap?
Well, and I think that's what we had recommended after looking at that report that really showed that gap. I believe that it's supposed to be a partnership between the public, private, and academia. They need to sit at the table and decide what kind of competencies are needed at the workplace, what kind of roles are needed in the industry, and then work backwards. So the curricula, I think the private sector and public sector have to be engaged in deciding what kind of curricula will be taught to these students.
Yeah. And I also noticed one thing, that the students normally are not updated on the latest topics. So let's say if you're doing your bachelor in information technology, so you don't know much about smart cities and blockchain and IoT or any latest topics which is actually happening in the industry. What do you say about it?
Well, I believe that goes across the board. So students, most of educational institutions are still working with this model that they have a set curricula, and then the kids, the youth graduate, and then they go and start looking, and then the industry feels that they're not really ready. They want them to have experience. So it's kind of a vicious circle. I believe that the industry engagement and private sector engagement should start in an early age, even before university. So that direction of the future jobs has to happen at an early age, because that also weighs on governments, because they invest in all these youth to educate them, and then you have thousands of graduates every year, and then the government jobs cannot absorb all of these.
I have been one of the key speakers when you talk about the future jobs.
Correct.
And I always say that down the line, 60% of the jobs which we are doing right now won't be there.
Yes.
It will be wiped out. So what sort of training skills you think which needs to be adopted in today's world? Because we can see the adoption of blockchain, IoT, and technology innovation, and then we have a fourth industrial revolution is also coming. So in your opinion, as an expert in this area, so what sort of skill set you think the students they really need to adopt, and what sort of initiatives the educational institutions they really have to take?
Sure. Well, as you rightly said, since 60% of the jobs, and I think even the WEF, the World Economic Forum, in a report said that the kids who are in primary school today will have jobs that don't exist today. So they don't know. So where should we start? We should start by helping these kids to start detaching from the future jobs. The famous question, where do you want to grow up when you grow up? That we all had.
Normally I ask,
we have to stop that question, because then you box that kid into, I want to be a doctor or a pilot or an engineer, and then when they get there, that job is not there. So this is where we need to start. And if you look at my book, and the subtitle is about how to remain relevant in an ever-changing world. So that mindset.
That's very impressive.
Exactly, becoming relevant, because I might be the expert. We both have higher education, we have doctorates and all of that, but if we don't update ourselves to remain relevant, then we will be as obsolete as, as old as is our education. A 15-year-old kid could do the job better. So it's really about preparing these youth to have what we call the 21st century skills, which is, of course, having the technology, definitely, otherwise you'll be illiterate. The illiterate of the 21st century is not the one who cannot read or write. It's a different kind of illiteracy. And then we have to make sure that they link what they want to do, their job, to a change that they want to make in the world, not to a specific job.
I have a question, why should I read this book? And if I read it, what I get out of it?
Well, seeds of change, as it says, is about planting the seeds for the future, the right seeds for the future, because the world that we are operating in today, the business landscape we're operating in today, is very unpredictable. And I think we had the biggest teacher in the past 18 months from COVID-19. And I had started writing my book before even COVID-19 was an issue. And then when COVID-19 crisis came, it validated the points that I'm talking about. Seeds is also framework. I mean, it means seeds, which means we need to plant the seeds for the future. But it also a framework that I believe strongly it is the future model of leadership. It's about sensing, because we can no longer predict. We can no longer base our decisions on data only. We need to develop some kind of sense. And I talk about that. We need to engage. We can no longer take decisions alone. We need to engage with the youth. Today, the youth have different motivations, different ways of wanting to work. You cannot treat them like the employees in Generation X, like ours.
I would like to ask a very sensitive question.
Sure.
COVID-19 has changed our lives.
Yes.
So how do you see the impact of pandemic on the youth development?
Well, it has its own advantages, just like any crisis. And I would want to borrow what Winston Churchill said: never waste a crisis. Yep. So we should never waste a crisis, because every crisis comes with opportunities. And I think this is showing us that the world is not going to stop changing. The world is just going to continue changing at really the highest speed, and we need to be resilient and agile to learn new ways. I think it's democratizing education in a way, because you have access to a lot of resources. The fact that everybody's used to the e-learning and the remote learning is also opening a lot of opportunities, but at the same time it might affect the social skills and the human interactions, and that's what we need to really draw a line.
Hanan, I have been following you from past several years, and I have seen you writing on Forbes and Oxford Business Reviews, which is like great articles. You being a woman, how do you see the women empowerment, especially in this part of the world?
Okay. Well, if you have been following me really well, you would know that I never use the word empowerment. Yeah. I don't think that we need to use the word empowering women, because I think women don't need to be empowered. They have that. They just need a space to be advanced. And if we need to use the word empowerment, and that's a quote that you could find online, it's we need to empower societies and workplaces with the feminine attributes. It's no longer about women, it's about the feminine attributes that the business landscape today needs, which is empathy, which is care, which is risk aversion. The model of leadership, the masculine model of leadership, is gone. The future needs these kind of leadership attributes that we can teach to men as well. Because it is not, but that's why I don't like the word empowerment, because we think that by putting a woman in a position and then she's forced to lead with the masculine model, then we don't serve the purpose. Yeah. It's about creating that conducive environment that will give us diversity in the model of leadership.
Well, I think that's what we need. I think that makes a lot of sense. So tell us about your project, Tawazun.
That's it. That brings us to Tawazun. Tawazun simply means balance in Arabic. And with Tawazun, we want to shift the narrative, especially in our Middle East and in Middle East region and Arab region. I personally don't believe in something called gender equality. I don't think we are equal. And with that does not make me less of somebody who wants to advance females. You know that I'm a big advocate. It just means that why do we have to limit to being equal? We could do better. Mm-hmm. So by putting that ceiling of talking about gender equality, what we do is limiting ourselves. Second, maybe we need rights that men haven't thought about before. Yep. So why do we have to only compare ourselves? Third, it only creates the gap, because it becomes, especially in our culture, in our Muslim and Arab culture, it just creates that competitiveness between men and women. So when we say balance, when we say tawazun, it means that we want to work together. This is not a fight between men and women, and this is somehow how it turned to be. Yeah. It's like women want to fight with men.
Even if you see now, like most of the major international companies, their CEOs, CFOs, or C-level communities are led by the women. So my question to you is: do you think, still now, the women are equally paid as compared to the men?
No, we still have a long way to go. But then again, and that's what, with Tawazun, for example, we want to create this debate. We don't want to be sitting in rooms, closed rooms, only women, or making all these women network, which is great. We need safe spaces for women to talk to each other, but we need to engage together in a human-centric a discussion, not a gender-centric discussion, if we want to solve the problem once for all. Yes, there is a lot to be done. We're not even talking about equal pay. We're talking about access to education, access to health. There is so much in other countries that is, and even in the West, by the way. You know that I run chapters of international organizations, and I get invited to the Silicon Valleys of the world, and even there, in the most advanced countries, the equality is still not there. So that's why probably we need a different way of tackling this, by engaging everyone, by starting to shift the narrative that we just want to have balanced societies and balanced work environments and a balanced world. And that's what Tawazun strives to achieve.
So you being a leader, especially in the area for leadership and transferring your knowledge to different skill set, what sort of advice you will give to the women in the Middle East or new entrepreneurs which are coming up? What are the areas they really need to focus to, to be shine among the society members?
I would just say, think of yourself as individual, because sometimes when we think, we start having those limiting beliefs that I am a woman, that's why I might not do this. Many of limiting beliefs, they're just coming from this assumption. Just think of yourself, choose what you want to do as an individual, regardless of if you are a man and a woman, and go with that decision, and then tackle the challenges just like any challenges. We don't have challenges because you are women. Sometimes we create those barriers without us seeing it. We create what we call that glass ceiling for ourselves.
Yeah. Another question which is important, like Emiratization, for example. I have seen UAE have done fantastic job in getting the locals into the private sector.
Correct.
So do you think that like most of the local Emirati women, they are ready for the private sector and they are working in the private sector, or their preference is always the public sector?
I think since the day I came here, I've seen really massive change, and especially in the mindset of the Emirati youth, men and women, really starting to believe that they need to contribute to the change, and they need to contribute to the growth of their country. And if that means that they need to be in the private sector, I think it's changing. It's gradual. It's not reaching the level that will make that integration of the local talent within the private sector. We have to be really fair and true to what's happening, and the data shows that. But I think it's going upwards, and it's just going to continue doing that.
In your opinion, and with respect to your skill set, where do you see the gaps in different industry segments?
The alignment, and that, as you call it, the industry integration. I feel that that's what we need to have. We have the best strategy, we have the best visions, but as Jim Collins said, it's the success of every strategy is only 1% vision, 99% alignment. So we need to work more on the alignment.
And you are also running one of the very successful leadership companies, Sustain Leadership.
Correct.
So what sort of projects you are working on under Sustain Leadership, and in which countries?
Sustain Leadership has been in business for the past 8 years, working with major banks, financial institutions here, with some of the government institutions, and it is called Sustain Leadership because it aspires to help organizations sustain their leadership.
So do you have any typical leadership development methodology?
Yes, yes. It's the seeds, actually. Sense, engage, empower, develop, and sustain. And that covers all the needs of the leadership model of the future.
Fantastic.
And I say that with full confidence.
A very important question. You see, so for example, I have led many departments. I am a public sector director also.
Yeah.
You put in one room, one department, with the same skill set, same education, different man, woman, and you give them a task. So most of these managers, they perform the task, but with their own style. Somebody finish it in one day, somebody takes 1 week to do it. So how do you compare that? How we can improve that sort of leadership skills?
Well, we are all different. It's really about knowing how to manage that diversity and how to have teams that are diverse. Some people, are more task-oriented. They need to work alone and focus on the results. Some others are more into collaborative ways, more into innovation, creativity. It's really about understanding how everybody is different, what are their areas of strength, and building. We focus in our model of leadership, we focus on strength-based training. We don't say we are fixing, because that connotation is negative. So we try to work with people, find what are their strengths and build on their strengths.
Fantastic.
And from there we tackle the areas of development. So yeah.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Hanan, for your wonderful presence. I really enjoyed talking to you always, and thanks a lot. Viewers, you're watching Live with Dr. Usman Zafar exclusively on News Time. So our today topic was about the leadership, and as we see that the Middle East have made a huge progress, and that is because of the strong leadership behind several initiatives in the region. And I congratulate a seasonal professional, Hanan, because they are always behind somewhere in this success. So thank you very much for watching this show. We will see you again with some more innovative ideas. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Hanan.
Thank you, and thank you for creating another platform to share knowledge and to share insights with the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.